China's economy is falling behind the rest of East Asia. The Solomon Islands signs an agreement with the U.S., but not without a catch. And Taiwan will now consider China's incursion into its airspace a first strike. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Surfshark. Whenever you go online, especially to look into controversial topics, you should be using a VPN like Surfshark to protect your identity. It's a week-long National Day holiday in China, which would normally mean lots of tourism, but it's not a good time to be traveling, thanks to China's zero-COVID policy. A popular tourist area in Yunnan province went under sudden lockdown this week after an outbreak of COVID was recorded. And a bunch of tourists were stranded at the local airport and weren't allowed to leave. When they tried to protest, that's when the big guns came out. Literally. What seems to be police pointing guns at Chinese citizens to keep them safe from COVID. The protesters didn't like that. According to reports, the protesters were detained and put in quarantine camp, which is why you should never go on vacation in China. Speaking of horrible COVID policy, we reported a few weeks ago about residents of Xinjiang dying under COVID lockdowns. Well, those strict COVID lockdowns were lifted, finally, but thanks to 38 new cases in one day, residents are now not allowed to leave Xinjiang to prevent spreading the virus to other parts of China. All outbound trains, interprovincial buses, and most flights will be suspended until further notice. Xinjiang has seen some of the harshest lockdowns in China. It's home to the majority of China's ethnic Uyghurs, many of whom are Muslim. But on the plus side, being locked in your home is still better than the alternative most Uyghurs face, being locked in a concentration camp. But thanks to COVID, the World Bank is predicting that China's economy is not going to do well this year. It's expected the GDP of East Asia overall will grow by 5.3%, but China by just 2.8% this year. This would be the first time since 1990 that China has lagged behind its Asian neighbors. The World Bank is blaming the difference in growth on China's zero-COVID policy, which at this point is containing zero of the virus, but all of the economy. The International Monetary Fund was only slightly more optimistic. It predicted China's growth would be 3.3% this year. The Asian Development Bank predicted the same. And over in Hong Kong, the government is demanding that foreign diplomats there provide floor plans for their missions. So any embassy or consulate, China wants them mapped out. And it's not just that. Officials want floor plans, details of rental or sale terms, as well as lease or sale agreements. Even details about the homes of staff. According to people familiar with the matter, China's foreign ministry has asked for new premises to be vetted before staff move into the building. Vetted? Well, that's a new way to say bugged. Because they're not stupid, diplomats are worried that Beijing could use the information to plant listening devices on the properties. One diplomat told the Financial Times that Beijing was doing this to make diplomats feel uneasy. Well, China, I think you succeeded. And after the break, did the Solomon Islands break with China by signing an agreement with the U.S.? Welcome back. We told you last week that the Solomon Islands had refused to sign a partnership declaration with the U.S. That was part of the first ever U.S. Pacific Island Summit held in Washington, D.C. last week. Well, the Solomon Islands changed its mind and signed the declaration, after indirect references to China were removed from the agreement. You may remember that a few months back, the Solomon Islands signed a security deal with China. Chinese police have already started training police in the Solomon Islands. And the Prime Minister has said he wants a more permanent Chinese police presence on the island to deal with uprisings. As you can imagine, the U.S. is pretty worried about China's influence in the country. When the Solomon Islands said it wouldn't sign the agreement between the U.S. and other Pacific Island countries, it looked like it had chosen China over the U.S. The Solomon Islands foreign minister said the reason they hesitated to sign it was that there was some references that put the country in a position where it would have to choose sides, and we don't want to have to choose sides. So the Solomon Islands chose not to choose. I wish I could do that with my birthday cake. Then I could have it and eat it too. But of course what this really means is that the Solomon Islands has chosen China over the U.S. They got the U.S. to take out references to China in the agreement before they signed it. That agreement also covered things like trade, natural disasters, and sustainable development. Now, the Biden administration has been trying to increase influence in the region. It recently pledged $810 million in new aid to the Pacific over the next 10 years. Biden will also appoint the first U.S. envoy to the Regional Pacific Islands Forum. It's about time. Parts of the region, especially the Solomon Islands, are quickly becoming the Pacific Autonomous Region of the People's Republic of China. And there are enough Chinese autonomous regions that, shall we say, aren't so autonomous. Speaking of the Pacific, Taiwan says it will now treat Chinese flights in its airspace as a first strike from Beijing. China's aircraft have repeatedly crossed into Taiwan's air defense identification zone. And China's ships and airplanes have crossed the median line in the Taiwan Strait. That line was negotiated years ago by the U.S. as a way to prevent conflict between China and Taiwan. But China has been crossing the median line more and more. Taiwan has thus far responded by issuing warnings, scrambling jets, and activating anti-air missile defenses. What China hasn't done yet is to actually cross into Taiwan's airspace. And Taiwan is warning China not to. Now, Taiwan's defense minister says, first strike or not, as long as any of China's aircraft or vessel crosses the line, we will destroy it. I'm so glad that World War III might just hinge on the Chinese military playing the I'm not touching you game with Taiwan's airspace. And after the break, a Chinese billionaire is being sued by a college student in the U.S. Welcome back. A Chinese billionaire has settled a sexual assault case in the U.S. The founder of JD.com, Richard Liu, was accused of raping a 21-year-old student at the University of Minnesota in 2018. She reported to the police and Liu was arrested, but he was released the next day. This became big news in China, where dozens of allegations of sexual misconduct against well-known men have surfaced in recent years. But the #MeToo movement has had few triumphs. Prosecutors decided not to press charges against Liu, saying there wasn't enough evidence. So then the woman filed a civil lawsuit seeking $50,000 in damages. But just before they were to appear in court this week, both sides announced a settlement with no further information. Activists in China treated news of the settlement as an important milestone, with supporters of the student calling it a historic moment in a social media post. So, a rich guy paid her off and faced virtually no other consequences. Milestone for feminism. And speaking of the justice system, a payphone has been ringing non-stop in Beijing, and it's not prank callers. Residents of Gourd Island in Liaoning province were calling to protest pollution in their city. Online petitions and blog posts documenting the city's air pollution were quickly deleted by online censors, and dozens of formal complaints were ignored. So residents started calling a random payphone in Beijing, hoping the central government would get the message. Their way of getting attention might sound a bit performative. And it was. They got the idea from a local performance artist. NPR spoke to one of the callers, and a few weeks later, the caller was detained by local police for 24 hours. After she was released, she posted a confession video to TikTok saying her earlier claims weren't true. Nothing like a confession video to say there's definitely nothing going on here. When NPR tried to call the payphone last month, just 2 months after the protest started, the phone no longer rang. The biggest surprise in all this, though, is that China still has payphones. And this episode is sponsored by Surfshark. When you go online, everything you do is being tracked and logged by the websites you visit and your internet service provider, and in many cases by your government. And it's not just in China. Citizens of nearly every country are being monitored constantly. And that's why, no matter where you live, you should always be keeping your internet activity private, using a VPN like Surfshark. Surfshark secures your data with top-of-the-line uncrackable encryption. And on top of that, Surfshark intentionally does not keep logs of what you do. In fact, one thing it does is keep a server network in the British Virgin Islands, where local laws allow Surfshark to not keep user data logs. So check out Surfshark. With just one Surfshark account, you can connect as many devices as you want. So try it out now. Surfshark has a special deal that includes 83% off a 2-year plan, plus 3 extra months for free. You can protect yourself for just $2.21 a month. So go to surfshark.com/uncensored and use the code uncensored to secure this deal. The link is in the description below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.